Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Zen Habits podcast. And in this season, as you know, we're talking about the Zen of productivity. And so productivity is about creating an impact and really being able to focus and bring our full selves to anything that we're taking on. But what gets in the way is distractions, is resistance, is fear, is uncertainty. And in this episode, we're going to deal specifically with one of those obstacles, which is distractions. So I'm sure you're familiar with this obstacle. This is something that I think is universal. And it falls into the realm of social media. It falls into the realm of notifications from messages, getting lost down a rabbit hole of Wikipedia or YouTube. Distractions are abundant. They're everywhere. So we have distraction. Machines in our hands, in our pockets. We have distraction machines where we work. We work in a full field of distractions. And so, how do we actually deal with that so that we can actually create what we want to create and have the impact in the world that we want to have? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some common distractions. We're going to talk about some mindful techniques to minimize those distractions. And then something that I think is really important is creating a focused work environment. So let's go over all of these. So first of all, common distractions. This one, we're not going to go too deep into this because I think you are probably aware of the most common ones. Most common ones would be our phones, specifically all kinds of social media. But by social media, we can talk about anything where there's a feed, anything where there's even updates that are constantly coming in, which are like messages. Would be a kind of social media, WhatsApp and Telegram and text messages, Facebook Messenger, obviously like Snapchat, but also things, as you know, TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, YouTube, Netflix. These would be things that we might not always think of as social media, but they definitely are. Reddit would be another really big one. So these are some common ones. We can kind of lump them into social media, but they're not the only distractions. News, we might think of news as a good thing. News can be a distraction. Our favorite website that has a blog, Zen Habits, can be a distraction. You might have a tech website that you like to go to, Hacker News. You might go to New York Times or whatever your favorite sources of news or information are. So these would be not bad things necessarily, but they can be distractions. Really, like email could be a distraction, even though we might think of email as a productive thing. If what we want to do is focus on, let's say, writing something, and we're doing email, then email becomes a distraction. And what you might notice is the thing in and of themselves are not bad things. YouTube, definitely not a bad thing. Podcasts, blogs, these are all things that I create. And so I don't think that any of them are necessarily bad. But it's the fact that we use them to get away from the thing that we want to be focusing on. And so really anything could be a distraction. I could use food as a distraction. Exercise could be a distraction. Learning could be a distraction. Conversations with real people in real life can be a distraction if we're using them to get away, using them to exit, to escape, to distract ourselves from the main thing. The main thing is, what did you decide that you want to do today, this week, this year, that's going to have the impact that you care about? And if you haven't identified that yet, then everything is a distraction because you're distracting yourself from figuring out the main thing. That's the main thing, is what do I actually want to focus on? What's the big thing? It may not be just one thing. It could be several. But today I want to do this one thing or these 2 or 3 things that are going to move me forward in this project that has the impact that I want to have, or in these several projects that have that impact. And so maybe you have several things that are your big thing, but if you've chosen to do this one right now or today, and you're distracting yourself by, doing a bunch of busy work, taxes and, budget and, email and all of these, chores, cleaning your kitchen can be a distraction if you're using it to move you away from what's most important. And so when we talk about common distractions, obviously phones and social media and things on our computers, notifications, these are all common distractions, but actually there's so many more that we don't think of as distractions, but they are, because they're moving us away. Productive things, getting organized, decluttering our lives. These are amazing things. In and of themselves are not bad. Conversation with someone who we care about. Great, I'm distracting myself with this conversation if I've chosen to do something else. Now maybe I decide mindfully that this is not the most important thing. Taking care of this person who's in a crisis is the most important thing right now. And so I consciously decide this is the most important thing and I'm not using it as a distraction. That can be the case. But if you find yourself constantly procrastinating on a certain task or project, and you find yourself constantly going over here to taking care of this emergency, then you're actually letting yourself off the hook, most likely. It's hard to see that. And so if you have, questions about this, feel free to email me, podcast@zenhabits.net, or put a comment below the YouTube version of this podcast and let me know, what do you think might be a distraction? Do you have a question about it? Do you need some help? Getting a coach who can be outside of you to help you to see it can also be helpful. Okay, so how do we minimize these distractions and how do we create a work environment? So what are some mindful techniques? So actually, let's reverse this. Focus work environment. I actually think that an environment conducive to focus that reduces distractions is really important, because our minds will just kind of, like, if you shot off some fireworks in this room, I'm going to pay attention to that, right? Our minds will go to distractions, and social media and other apps and other websites, other tech things are really good at distracting the mind and calling our attention and saying, hey, you want to be moving into this. And so, they've perfected the art of it. And so all of these things are calling for attention. And if you have 1,000 things calling for your attention in the environment you're in, you will pay attention to them. And so if our work environment is filled with distractions, we're fighting a losing battle. It's like saying, oh, I'm trying to stick to a diet, but all of my favorite, most tempting foods are surrounding me. I'm just going to be really tough about it. That's, you can do that for a little while. You have a limited amount of ability to withstand those kinds of urges, but eventually you will cave in. And so why make it that hard on yourself? Why not get rid of those tempting foods, put them outside of the house so they're not there, constantly making you drain your willpower, constantly making you need to resist, and finally you give in. And so you can see that example with food. It's the same thing with distractions. If they're all around you, constantly calling at you, you can resist them for a little while, but we won't be able to do it for very long. So how do we create that focused work environment? Well, if you have a phone nearby, turn it off or put it on airplane mode and put it in a drawer or turn it upside down so it's face down. Make sure there's no notifications, sounds, or buzzes. So turn off any notifications. In my phone, I actually like to turn off pretty much all notifications other than the phone, where if I want that phone to ring and I'm waiting for a call. But otherwise, my message notifications, I will have the notifications on, but there's no sound, there's no buzzing, no vibration. So I don't like those kinds of things, because if I'm talking with someone, if I'm trying to work and that phone is buzzing or dinging, then I can't focus. So I like to silence the notifications. I actually like to put it on airplane mode, or I like to put it into a drawer and not look at it. On my computer, if I'm working on the computer, I will also turn off notifications. You won't see things popping up as I'm doing this doing this podcast or writing or doing anything, I turn off all notifications. If I want to check my messages, I will do it after I'm done with this task. If I want to check my email, I will do it after. So notifications, minimize them, silence them, block them, go in airplane mode, whatever you need to do to turn that off. I actually don't think notifications are useful in most cases. Okay, so notifications and phone. On your phone, if you wanted to actually not have distractions on your phone and use it for, a productive purpose, let's say you wanted to read, let's say you have books on there or, long form articles saved on there with some app. Airplane mode really works well, and also not having apps on there that are going to call to you. Messaging apps, sure, but what about deleting all the social media apps? I actually think you could delete all social media apps. And if there are certain websites that you go to, so let's say you deleted Reddit, but you go to the Reddit website, you can actually block those sites. I know in both Android and iOS, they have settings that will block the websites. You'll have to Google it, but you can block websites if they are calling to you a lot. If you're like, I deleted Facebook, but I'm constantly going to Facebook, or I deleted, something, but I'm constantly going to the website, block the website so that even if you try to enter it into the browser, it stops it. Of course, you can always undo all of these things, but taking them out, it's like creating a moat. Okay, so that's the phone. On the computer, same thing. You can create site blockers so that you don't go to those websites. And you can say, I'm going to have site blockers for all except for at 6 p.m. That's when I can actually go and look. From 6 to 7, I'm going to go and look at all those sites, but I'm not going to do it before 6 or after 7. And so you can set up some times. What would actually work for you so that you can get a taste of those distractions, but they're at times when you decided intentionally. So I actually think that can be really helpful, especially if you're going to certain sites a lot. I also think having certain times for different things, as I mentioned, 6 to 7 o'clock, as an example, could be the time when you go and read all your news websites and your social media. But you can do that for messaging. You might have certain times when you go and do your messaging, or if your work app is, Slack or Microsoft whatever, or Google whatever, or Asana, or these kinds of Jira, these kinds of apps. You might have certain times during the day when you go and check the messages and go through it all. So I actually like to go through my work app messages twice a day. And that means that I'm going to be checking, but I'm not going to be checking constantly. And my team knows that I'm not always on there. I do my email several times a day, but not all day long. I do my messages several times a day, but not all day long. But I'm making sure that I am actually checking them at least once a day, if not several, but not all day long. And so I block off times when I'm going to be doing those things. And then for the rest of the time, I will block off times when I use a full screen mode kind of app. So if I want to write, I'm in full screen mode with my writing. Or if I want to take notes or brainstorm or whatever, it's full screen mode. If I'm going to record something, I close everything else out. I clear out my desktop and I am just here recording. And that's all there is. So that's creating a focused work environment. I actually highly recommend full screen mode for writing or any other kind of creating. Let's talk about some mindful techniques. Once we've created this full screen mode, the first thing is to have some kind of intention. What am I actually going to focus on? If you don't know the intention, you don't know if there's a distraction. If you're doing your email, is that a distraction or is that productive? Who knows unless you have an intention. If you say, right now is my email, 30 minutes of email, you set a timer and you have an intention, this is what I'm going to be doing, then you know that actually this is not a distraction. And going to check your social media is a distraction. If you instead said, right now is my time for writing, and for the next 30 minutes I'm going to be writing, and then you go and check your email, then you know email is a distraction. So have an intention. The second thing is have a commitment. I am going to do it for 30 minutes. I'm blocking off a chunk of time and I'm going to do that for the next 30 minutes. That's a commitment. So there's an intention and then there's a commitment. And if you can stay accountable to that commitment, that's also a really good thing. So mindful techniques, we would start with intention and we start with commitment. The next thing is noticing. Mindful technique of noticing is, am I focused on this thing or am I off doing something else? And if I'm off doing something else, I just notice like, ooh, I'm off doing that thing. And then I simply come back. I might breathe. I might notice, oh, I'm feeling some overwhelm or some anxiety with this particular task. I'm feeling some fear. So I can breathe and be with the thing that's coming up that makes me want to get away from this thing and distract myself. Because distraction is simply an inability to be with the emotions that come up for you when you face this task, this thing that you want to do. So I want to have this difficult conversation. Not right now, because I need to go put out this fire. Because you are dreading or fearing this difficult conversation. Something comes up and you're like, ooh, I need to get away from that. Now we don't realize this oof part. But what if we could realize like, ooh, I'm trying to get away from this thing. What's showing up here for me emotionally in my body? It's like, ooh, some anxiety. So we can breathe and be with that anxiety. Bring some compassion to it, just like, ooh, you're okay. You got this. And then turn towards the thing for at least a few seconds, maybe 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Can you write one paragraph? Can you do it for a minute? Can you do it for 2 minutes? And then get away. Let yourself distract and then come back. So that's a mindful technique for dealing with distractions. With practice, we can actually notice more often and we can be with our anxiety more often, but it takes a lot of practice. So I really encourage you to set intentions, commit yourself, and then commit to practicing with the urges, the anxiety that comes up that has you moving away, noticing as you do so, and then coming back and practicing being with the anxiety that's stopping you. Create a focused work environment, shut down all of the notifications, turn on site blockers if you need it, and go full screen mode. And then really be fully in with the thing that you've chosen to be fully in with. That's what I've got for you. I hope this helps. I will talk to you later, my friends. Bye-bye.